Hello and welcome to St. Thomas Aquinas for Everyone. My name is Dave Palmer, and we are continuing in this section of the Summa about what I call, what does God do? Last video was about his knowledge. Remember, his knowledge is the cause of things, and that was really interesting. And so this one is going to be about God's will. I warn you ahead of time that some of this is pretty deep, and it's kind of confusing, but hang with it. This also is going to be a little bit longer of a video than usual, but please keep watching because remember, the goal of the Summa, the goal of life is to come to know God. And in order for us to know God, we have to understand God. And so these are very, very important lessons about God's intelligence, his knowledge, and also his will. So let's move right to it, and Thomas is going to talk about the will of God. And we're still in prima pars, okay? This is the beginning of the Summa, and let's get right to it. Thomas says, whether there is will in God. Now, will is an intellectual appetite, okay? An intellectual appetite. And I want to read what Thomas's answer says, and then I'll give some illustrations to make it hopefully a little bit easier for you to understand, okay? Thomas says, there is will in God as there is intellect, since will follows upon intellect, okay? So anything that has intellect has will. That's basically what he's saying. For as natural things have actual existence by their form, so the intellect is actually intelligent by its intelligible form. Okay, now we're talking about form and matter, and so that should ring a bell as well. Now everything has this aptitude towards its natural form, that when it has it not, it tends towards it, and when it has it, it is at rest therein. It is the same with every natural perfection, which is a natural good. Remember, one of the big themes of the Summa is the natural and the supernatural. And so Thomas is going to talk about natural things, things down here below that aren't really necessarily talking about supernatural grace and things like that. So let's keep going here. This aptitude to good in things without knowledge is called natural appetite. Okay, let me give you an example of what he means by natural appetite. You're at a picnic and you have a watermelon, okay, and you set it down, you walk away for about 20 minutes. You come back, it's probably going to look something like this, okay, because these natural creatures that lack intelligence, these little ants, have been drawn towards a natural good. Okay, that's what Thomas is talking about here. It's something that they desire. It's a sensitive appetite, right? And quite frankly, we have this same sensitive appetite that the ants or the dogs have, and here's the proof. You ever been around a pizza and you want it, right? Just like the ants want the watermelon. But there's a difference. We are intelligent creatures, and so ours goes a little bit beyond this, right? This aptitude to good in things without knowledge is called natural appetite. Whence also intellectual natures have a like aptitude as apprehended through its intelligible form. Okay, now we're talking about intelligent creatures like us, okay, like angels as well. So as to rest therein when possessed, and when not possessed, to seek to possess it, both of which pertain to the will. Hence in every intellectual being there is will, just as in every sensible being there is animal appetite. So every sensitive creature, a dog, a cat, a porpoise, a porcupine, a cricket, has a natural appetite. Anything with intelligence is going to have a will. We've already proved that God has intelligence, God has knowledge, so therefore God has will. Okay, and so there must be will in God since there is intellect in him, and as his intellect is his own existence, so is his will. Now I understand it's pretty deep, but we exercise will, things like desiring to graduate from high school to college. Okay, that's not a sensitive appetite, that's an intellectual appetite, and therefore it is a will. You ever been on a freeway like this and everybody's driving somewhere? Everybody in every one of these cars is exercising their will because there's some intellectual appetite that they have. They're trying to get to school or to work or to whatever, driving their kids to soccer practice. The exercise of the will is happening. All right, Thomas goes on. Question number 19 of Prima Pars now, article number 2, whether God wills things apart from himself. Okay, up until now we just say, okay, God has intellect, therefore he has will. But that just means that he desires something, okay? What about, does he desire something outside of himself? Well, I think you probably know the answer to this, but here's what Thomas says. He says, God wills not only himself, but other things apart from himself. For natural things have a natural inclination not only toward their own proper good, to acquire it if not possessed, and if possessed, to rest therein, but also to spread abroad their own good amongst others. I'm going to give you a very classic example of this in just a moment. So far as possible, hence we see that every agent, insofar as is perfect, is in act, produces its like. Okay, remember that, produces its like. It pertains, therefore, to the nature of the will to communicate as far as possible to others the good possessed, and especially does this pertain to the divine will. God wants to spread his goodness to the entire world, and that's what he does on a daily basis, from which all perfection is derived in some kind of likeness. Hence, if natural things, insofar as they are perfect, communicate their good to others, much more does it appertain to the divine will to communicate by likeness its own good to others as much as possible. Okay, pictures tell 1,000 words. All right, we communicate our goodness to our children. We co-create with God, and we create children. Okay, in our own likeness, right? This is the way that we communicate our goodness. Let me give you a very, very down-to-earth example. You ever go to the zoo? Why do you go to the zoo? You go to the zoo because the zoo is filled with these incredible creatures like lions and giraffes and apes and gorillas and also panda bears, right? But these creatures don't really know what they're doing. They are communicating their goodness, but they don't realize it. That means there's somebody else that is kind of calling the shots, so to speak. So God communicates his goodness through these creatures at the zoo. That's why when we go to the zoo, they should have signs everywhere saying, praise God for these incredible creatures that we're witnessing, okay? Think about that the next time you go to the zoo. They are communicating their goodness. How do we communicate our goodness? Well, have you ever brought cookies over to the neighbor that moves into your neighborhood? Have you ever helped an elderly person, maybe buying them groceries? Have you ever gone to your neighbor and said, hey, can I rake your leaves? Can I do some work for you? Can I help you? This is communicating our goodness. But but we're intellectual creatures, right? So we want to spread our goodness, and that's how we exercise our will, not only for ourselves, but for other people's benefit as well. And Thomas is just saying, hey, God does the same thing, but in a much, much, much more profound way. All right, whether the will of God is always fulfilled, does God always get his way? He says the will of God must needs always be fulfilled. In proof of this, we must consider that since an effect is conformed to the agent according to its form, the rule is the same with active causes as with formal causes. Okay, remember the Aristotelian causes? It all ties together, I promise. Yeah. The rule in forms is this, that although a thing may fall short of any particular form, it cannot fall short of the universal form. Since then, the will of God is the universal cause of all things, and that should make you think of the second proof of the existence of God, it is impossible that the divine will should not produce its effect. Hence, that which seems to depart from the divine will in one order returns to it in another order, as does the sinner who by sin falls away from the divine will as much as lies in him, yet falls back into the order of that will when by its justice he is punished. All right, so God allows some things to seem to fall out of his will, but he always brings it back. Okay, so God is in charge of the whole world. In fact, God is in charge of the entire universe. And sometimes it appears that something happens that falls outside of God's will, like sin, for example. But as he just mentioned, God is able to bring that back in and bring a good from the sin. The classic example is what happened on Calvary 2,000 years ago, seemingly the worst possible event in the history of the world we now call Good Friday, because it was able to be brought to good by God, who his will is always fulfilled. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, the last thing we'll learn, whether the will of God imposes necessity on the thing's will. Now here's where we're talking about free will. predestination? Is God calling the shots? Are we just robots? Thomas says the divine will imposes necessity on some things, but not on all. Since then, the divine will is perfectly efficacious. It follows not only that things are done which God wills to be done, but also that they are done in the way that he wills. Now, God wills some things to be done necessarily, some contingently, to the right ordering of things. All right, God is ultimately in control for the building up of the universe. Therefore, to some effects, he has attached necessary causes. I'll give you an example in just a second, okay? That cannot fail. But to others, defectible and contingent causes from which arise contingent effects. Hence, it is not because the proximate causes are contingent that the effects willed by God happens contingently, but because God prepared contingent causes for them by being his will that they should happen contingently. That means contingently means that they're not necessarily, they don't have to happen. Let me give you a very classic example. All right, looky here. The bird builds a nest. This is a necessary cause. The bird does not have a choice. The bird is just doing it out of instinct. This is a necessary cause. The man praying, he had free will. He could have prayed or he didn't have to pray. God allows us to have that option. This is where free will comes in, right? So we can pray or we can not pray. We can sin, we could be obedient. We could be virtuous, we could be sinful. These are contingent causes. And God ultimately allows that, and that's why it never escapes his will. All right, I know this was a lot, and this is pretty deep. Go back and watch the video again if you can stand to watch it twice, okay? And this is important stuff, and so please pay attention to it, and it just keeps getting better and better. And I know it's challenging, but again, if you stick with this, you're really, really going to enjoy this, and it will change your life when you understand what Thomas Aquinas is getting at with this entire Summa. Okay, that does it. Thanks so much for watching. Another one is on the way, and we're going to talk about God's love next, which is connected to his will. Okay, that'll be next. Thank you for watching. This is St. Thomas Aquinas for everyone. I'm Dave Palmer, and may God bless you. Thank you.